at the new chapter that we have all ushered in, new chapter of real democracy where, you know, the public discourse is encouraged and citizens are encouraged to truly participate in these vital conversations that, you know, elicit sometimes great solutions. And so we are very happy that many Ghanaians, including the opposition New Patriotic Party, has taken the invitation of His Excellency to feel free to express themselves. Whatever legal vehicle is available to them, and that includes protestations. Yeah. And so we have seen them already, you know, conduct 2 protestations to test, you know, the commitment of His Excellency to this new era of freedoms on the side of citizens. And so we are happy about also the feedback we have received after His Excellency presented to the people of Ghana, in whom sovereignty really, you know, resides, his social contract. He was not obliged to. It was a commitment he made upon himself to serve him well in terms of the urgency he himself was bringing to the new, you know, to the task of the presidency, and also to prove to the people of Ghana that when we came to them and we called on them to vote for experience over experiment, this is really what we meant. We meant that there's going to be a new era informed largely by lessons learned from the previous experience, and that deep knowledge about how the system works and where the leakages were and what right sets of approaches should be is what informed even our manifesto, which was really resetting Ghana for jobs, accountability, and prosperity. So if you look at the 120-day promises, it focuses on our key priority areas that we believed if we were quickly able to put the strong and the right foundations in, the reset agenda will well be on course. And I'm really happy at the feedback from all well-meaning and fair-minded Ghanaians that indeed we have shown some real progress, and really what we are expecting from now on is a further consolidation of the gains. And
in fact, that's the purpose of this conversation. Yes. So that, I mean, you speak for the government as well, so you can also give us some insight. But definitely, we need to get the conversation going. Yes. I was asking about your reflections.
And it's part of the Sammy Gyamfi matter. Yes. It's part of, I think that for everybody, self-awareness is very important. And I think one of the values of great leadership is self-awareness. Self-awareness to be able to look back at an action of yours, whether it's a private action that has become a public matter, in the case of this Sammy Gyamfi issue, to be able to have the presence of mind to recognize where the indiscretion might have occurred, and to, without any prompting, come out to acknowledge, you know, the mistake that may have been made, the optics of a private moment now played out, you know, in the public for everyone to see and have opinions about reasonably. What we would want to say is that as a government, the Chief of Staff has since invited Sammy Gyamfi to come and speak to this matter. And so the Chief of Staff in the Office of the Presidency. Pardon?
When exactly is Sammy showing up?
Oh, I'm sure today. It's an urgent matter.
So I'm just asking because you walk the corridors of power, so you would know when. The invitation is, this happened over the weekend, as you know. So the invitation has gone to Sammy to show up, and because of the respect he has to the office, I'm sure that he will be showing up today. But also to add to the fact that it comes at the back of the launch of a new code of conduct. And yes. If you look at the code of conduct, there are a number of sanctions for whatever identified acts of indiscretion or wrongdoing. It ranges from an apology, a public apology for that maybe stated misbehavior or misconduct, to a formal reprimand, which we know that the apology has already even come without the prompting of anyone. An invitation has come, so if a reprimand is in order, I'm sure that we would hear what what decision government will take. It also even includes resignation or suspension, and then ultimately when the conduct is of very severe nature, sometimes even bordering on criminality, you may be asked to go through termination. Okay. And so there are lessons for all of us public office holders in how we balance the public expectation of good
And this was one of the reasons why on your similar platform, when the issue of the value of gifts receiving, and again, the feedback we're getting. So in our code of conduct, it is mostly about receiving gifts, okay? And where the conversation is about gift giving, it's around the issue of hampers. So this time we need to go back again and have a conversation about gifts giving from you, the public office holder, and what the parameters of, being generous and, responding to. Look, when we go to places, your cars are swarmed by people asking for all kinds of things. And so when I said somewhere else that in a day, the expenses, and you people have done these democracy watch activities over years. And I've said that beyond having deeper conversations about political party financing and campaign financing, we must have an open, transparent conversation about governance financing, because once somebody transcends into public office, there is a lot of expectation to solve not only the long-term problem, but the immediate needs of people. And that
in this
cannot be described as being insensitive, because to not respond to these demands would rather present you as being non-responsive to the needs of the people that you say that you serve. Okay. So let us learn the lessons as public officers and see if we can find a balance between what the public itself expects from us. I think largely in some cases, it is the recipient. It's the recipient of that gift that has created this brouhaha.
We'll talk about the fight against corruption, asset declaration, code of conduct, like you mentioned, and the 24-hour economy and the issues of unemployment. But Doc, brief take on this matter before we get into the topic of corruption.
So I've always said that our public officials always have to pass two tests, what I call the legal test and the appearance test. They tend to do well on the legal test, right? Anytime an issue erupts, you're first pointed to the law. Did he or she do anything wrong? Has he or she broken any law? What gets them into some of these unfortunate situations is the appearance test. And when you're in public office, you have to even pay more attention to the way things look, because that is where you even end up losing a lot more goodwill and trust. So my thing is, I'm glad that the Chief of Staff has summoned him. I'm glad that he apologized. There's a code of conduct in place. Whatever the appropriate sanctions are, I just hope that the president will demonstrate, swiftness in dealing with this in terms of applying the appropriate sanction, so that at least he can show that, look, this code of conduct that we have instituted, it's a policy that we intend to reinforce. And it's a lesson to all current public officials as well, right? That nobody is against you being generous, but you also have to put it within the right context and know that it can have certain unintended consequences.
You speak of appropriate sanctions. What would be appropriate from where you sit?
Appropriate, at most, suspension.
At most?
Yes. I would. Yes, at most.
At most?
Yes.
Worst case scenario?
Worst case scenario, yes.
So those who are saying he should be sacked and the rest, what do you say to them?
No, and in fact, to quickly also revisit the code of conduct, I think one of the things the code of conduct needs to do now is the last section on measures of violation. I think it needs a lot more clarity and specificity around things like first offense, appropriate sanction, even depending on the type of offense. So, for example, if you improperly file a government document, right, do you get the same sanction versus if you engage in an act of corruption or a conflict of interest? Do you see what I'm saying? You need a lot more clarity so that, it's like one strike, this is the appropriate penalty, two strikes, this is the appropriate penalty. In this area, this is the appropriate penalty. But I wouldn't go that extreme. But I think even with the code of conduct, there are certain steps, a reprimand, and then certain things follow to the point where there could be a resignation and a termination. Just because you mentioned the code of conduct, right. If you asked me, I was disappointed over the weekend. A lot of people, passed comments on that, and I feel
quite a bit of them justified. Yes, he did the right thing by apologizing. Yes, it's another right step for the Chief of Staff, Julius Deborah, to invite him, give him the summons. But I feel that was poor judgment. It's not to say that we understand the cultural, aspect of it and how some things happen. But I keep saying it was clear there were phones, cameras. It was obvious that this was maybe it should have been taken care of in that light. But anyway, those are my quick thoughts. Shamima, so you've given some confirmation on the invitation and that you don't know what it will entail, though.
No,
you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. How seriously is government taking this?
Every action, however minor or major, is taken seriously by government, as we should, because, again, one of the greatest tests of this administration would be its congruence to its stated values. And it is fair that if we set a high standard for ourselves, that Ghanaians would want to hold us to those standards, especially when we had seen really eroded standards in governance over the years. And so when you hear people recognize the progress we are making in our attempts to sanitize our governance, we know that to whom much is expected, given much is expected, even if we have brought it upon ourselves. Because again, we can't lament about deteriorating governance standards and do nothing about it. So, for example, Dr. Akwete was on Joy this weekend, and he did acknowledge the fact that since the Fourth Republic, we have never seen any sanction at all made against any public officer for breaching, say, the asset declaration regime. And that even though none of the appointees have actually breached the enabling law, which gives them at least 6 months, up to 6 months, to file their asset declaration forms. His Excellency, because of the agency with which he needed all appointees to be aligned to his values of prudence and respect for our rules, is the one that gave us the deadline of 31st of March. And because people breached it, on the day that he actually launched the code of conduct was the day, as you have said, that we need to give examples that we mean business. This second action regarding Sammy Gyamfi is not the first. The first major test was on the day of the launch when the president announced sanctions to appointees who missed the 31st deadline, even though they had not missed the constitutional expectation of a 6-month, period. Right. And what was the sanction? It is quite severe. 3 months forfeiture of salary is quite severe as a first indication of seriousness to the ideals of these new resets agenda that His Excellency, has communicated to the people of Ghana. And so there is that goodwill on the side of His Excellency. What I also want to say is that we should encourage more transparency and more honesty on the side of, public office holders. I have found in my attempt to be sometimes open and honest about these matters that are vexed matters, for long periods of time, and to also communicate that even as we put these programs and plans in place, there will be room for improvement, because we can't have a perfect, guideline. Just as we even do not have a perfect constitution. 32 years on, a constitution review committee is hard at work to look at the errors. So once there is that communication of goodwill, let us all come together. And that's why His Excellency said, let us join hands. Right. Because the task of resetting this nation is not only a work that can be done by political leaders. It must be
done by all of us. I just have a quick follow-up. We must move the conversation forward. The President gave a deadline, which was last Wednesday, for the declaration of assets, lest you could lose your job.
Yes.
What's the latest on that? Does it mean all of the government's appointees per the law have filed their asset declaration?
They should have. They should have.
But you don't know for certain?
I don't know for certain, because we need to find out from the office of the Chief of Staff per the reports that he'll be getting from the Auditor General, who has since complied with the extended deadline, and also to indicate that that deadline is for all those who had been appointed up